Today, families around the country are being hammered. Hundreds of thousands of families are living from overdraft to overdraft, and many other families are completely maxed out at this stage. Families are going without food and they're going without heat, and energy prices are skyrocketing. It's incredible. The people are actually spending time awake at night trying to work out what bill they can afford to pay and how will they make ends meet. And some of the advice that we've got from the government in response to it is incredible. Drive slowly and shop around. Now, today we saw inflation hit 8.2% in this state. That's an incredible level. And that money is coming out of the pockets of people. And there's obviously a number of reasons for this, and some of those reasons are international and they're beyond the control of the government. But many of those reasons are local and in the control of the government. And it's interesting to see that the government is now blaming COVID supply chains as a cause of some of the breakdowns that are leading to this inflation. But this government imposed the longest and most severe lockdowns on supply chains in all of Europe. So the government's policies led directly, in many ways, to the crisis people are experiencing in their pocket as well. In relation to fuel, the government is in control of that issue. Over 50% of a litre of fuel currently is government tax. And the higher the price the fuel goes, the more the government makes. And indeed, last year the government made €1.5 billion extra in VAT as a result of the increased cost of fuel. Now, you've said you refuse to look at VAT in relation to fuel. You said that your hands are tied by the EU on this, but it's interesting that the government doesn't feel the same reticence to reduce VAT on hotels, for example. There was no problem with that. And that sector some in that sector are now gouging tourists and locals alike with regards to prices. Many energy firms are seeing rocketing profits and rocketing turnovers currently. And some of these are local, and the ESB is one of those. The ESB made a profit of €679 million to December 2021. It is a state-owned company, and yet it's still increasing the price of electricity to consumers. You could, as the shareholder of the ESB, you could look for them to reduce the pressure on families, but you won't. Last week, we in Aontú said about the issue of the M50 tolls, and if there was ever a monument to Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael waste, it has to be the two toll bridges on the M50. They were built at a cost of €58 million in a public-private partnership that was signed off by Padraig Flynn, who had later came to know in one of the commissions of inquiry, or the tribunals, actually received a donation from the successful company. Now, that company charged tolls on those bridges for years. It actually recouped the cost of building those toll bridges in just 1 year. It then sold those bridges to the state for €600 million after making massive profits on it. And since then, since 2009, this government has recouped €1.3 billion on the tolls on the busiest road in the country. This government is in charge of that. It could reduce the pressure on families by reducing or scrapping that toll, but it won't. In relation to food prices, today's farm inflation is tomorrow's consumer inflation. And last year saw the price of fertiliser increase by 149%. And now 78% of farmers are actually going to reduce the level of fertiliser that they use. And this is to be coupled with the fact that cattle prices coming into farmers are increased by 22% and feed prices are going up. So even before this inflation came into being, farmers were barely making a living in this country. Now, I've asked, and Aontú has asked, for the government to put a subsidy on fertiliser prices, but this government has refused to do so. And as a result, after this harvest, the increased prices in the inputs of farming will mean increased prices on the shelves for consumers. And in all of these situations, the government is refusing to act. Before even this inflation crisis hit, this state was the 6th most expensive country in Europe, and Dublin was the 4th most expensive city in Europe, because the government won't reform the sectors that are maximising profits. Even when the Troika were here, they were pointing the fingers at closeted sectors that the government would not reform. There is a laissez-faire attitude to this government, Fianna Fáil and the Greens, in terms of fixing the cost of living to people. And that laissez-faire attitude is costing people dearly. Gurb Mahagat.